Clara Morgan screamed as the stagecoach flipped sideways, her body slamming against the wooden frame. The crack of her leg bone cut through the thunder like a gunshot. Rain poured through the broken door as she clawed at the mud, dragging herself from the wreckage. The other passengers were already running toward higher ground, and not one of them looked back. "Help me!" she cried. "Please, someone help me!" But the storm swallowed her voice, and she was alone. This is a story about being abandoned and being found. About the moment when everything breaks and someone unexpected puts you back together. If you want to see how Clara's story unfolds, subscribe to our channel and follow her journey to the very end. Drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Clara Morgan had made peace with dying alone. Not today, she'd hoped. Not like this. But life in 1878 had taught her that hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. The summer storm had come out of nowhere, turning the Colorado sky black as midnight in the span of 20 minutes. One moment she'd been watching the prairie grass bend in the breeze. The next, lightning split the heavens, and rain fell so thick she couldn't see her own hand in front of her face. "Driver, we need to stop," the man across from her had shouted. "Can't stop now," the driver yelled back. "Creek's rising. We gotta cross before it floods." They didn't make it. The horses panicked halfway across. The current caught the wheels, and Clara felt the whole world tilt sideways as the stagecoach flipped into the rushing water. She remembered screaming. She remembered the snap of bone in her left leg, pain so fierce it stole her breath. She remembered hands grabbing at her, then letting go. "Leave her. She's trapped. We can't wait. The water's rising." God forgive us. Then nothing but rain and darkness, and the cold certainty that she was going to die in a flooded creek in the middle of nowhere 300 miles from the man she'd promised to marry. Clara didn't know how long she lay there, half submerged in mud and debris, her broken leg pinned beneath the overturned coach. Long enough for the other passengers to disappear. Long enough for the storm to fade to a steady downpour. Long enough for her to start praying not for rescue, but for the courage to face what was coming. "Please, Lord," she whispered, "don't let me die afraid." That's when she heard the horse. At first she thought she was imagining it. The fever was already setting in, making everything hazy and strange, but then a voice cut through the rain, deep and rough and undeniably real. "Hello, anyone here?" Clara tried to answer, but all that came out was a weak moan. The voice came closer. "I see you. Hold on, I'm coming." She heard splashing footsteps, and then a man appeared above her, water streaming off the brim of his hat. She couldn't see his face clearly in the dim light, but she saw his eyes gray-blue sharp, taking in her situation in one quick glance. "My leg," she managed. "It's broken. I'm stuck." He didn't waste time with questions. He crouched beside the wreckage, testing the weight of the overturned coach. "This is gonna hurt," he said. "But I need to lift this off you. You ready?" "No." "Good. That means you're honest." He positioned himself, bracing his shoulder against the wooden frame. "On 3. 1." He lifted on 1. The coach shifted, and Clara screamed as her leg came free. Before she could catch her breath, strong arms were pulling her from the mud, cradling her against a chest that smelled of leather and rain and horse. "I've got you," he said. "I've got you, ma'am. You're safe now." Clara wanted to thank him. She wanted to ask his name, ask where they were going, ask how he'd found her in the middle of a storm on an empty prairie. But the pain was too much, and the world was spinning, and all she could do was grip his wet shirt and hold on as darkness pulled her under. She woke to warmth. That was the first thing Clara noticed. She was warm and dry for the first time in what felt like hours. The second thing she noticed was the pain, a throbbing ache in her left leg that made her gasp. "Easy now." The same voice from before, low and steady. "Don't try to move." Clara opened her eyes. She was lying on a bedroll inside what looked like an abandoned cabin, firelight flickering against rough wooden walls. The man who'd rescued her was crouched by the hearth feeding sticks into the flames. "Where am I?" Her voice came out scratchy and weak. "Old Trapper's cabin, about 2 miles from where I found you." He didn't turn around. "Storm's still going strong. We'll have to wait it out." "The others, the people from the stagecoach." "Gone. I followed the road for a mile, didn't see anyone. They probably made it to town." "They left me." The words came out flat hollow. "They saw I was trapped, and they left me." Now he turned, and for the first time, Clara got a good look at her rescuer. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair curling damply against his forehead and a few days' worth of stubble on his jaw. His clothes were worn but clean, the practical garb of a working cowboy. But it was his eyes that held her attention, gray-blue and guarded like storm clouds hiding something deep. "People do desperate things when they're scared," he said. "Doesn't make it right, but it's true. That's generous of you. Just honest." He rose and crossed to where she lay kneeling beside her. "I need to look at your leg. I set it best I could while you were out, but I want to make sure the splint's holding." Clara nodded, bracing herself as he carefully lifted the blanket covering her lower half. She was still wearing her traveling dress, though it was torn and mud-stained beyond repair. Her left leg was bound between 2 straight branches, wrapped tightly with strips of cloth. "You did this?" she asked, surprised by the neat professional work. "I've set a few bones in my time." He probed gently around the injury, his touch surprisingly careful for such large hands. "It's a clean break. Should heal straight if you stay off it." "How long?" 4 weeks, maybe 6. Clara closed her eyes. 4 weeks. She was supposed to be married in 3 days. "Ma'am, you all right?" "My name is Clara, Clara Morgan." She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. "And no, I'm not all right. But I'm alive thanks to you. That's more than I expected an hour ago." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. "Elijah Dawson. Most folks call me Eli." "Thank you, Eli, for not riding past." He shrugged, looking uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Couldn't leave you out there. Wouldn't have been able to live with myself. The people on that stagecoach seemed to manage it just fine." Eli didn't respond to that. Instead, he moved back to the fire where a battered tin pot was starting to steam. "You should try to eat something. I've got some jerky and hardtack. Nothing fancy, but it'll keep your strength up." Clara wasn't hungry, but she knew he was right. She accepted the food he offered, forcing herself to chew and swallow, despite the way her stomach churned. "Where were you headed?" Eli asked, settling against the wall across from her. "Before the storm, I mean." "Cold Spring. I was supposed to arrive yesterday." "Cold Spring's another 60 miles southwest. What's waiting for you there?" Clara hesitated. There was no reason to lie, but something about saying it out loud made it feel more real, more final. "A husband," she said. "Or at least a man who's going to be my husband. We've been corresponding for 8 months. He owns a general store there." Eli's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Mail order arrangement." "Yes." She lifted her chin, daring him to judge her. "Is that a problem?" "No, ma'am. I mean Clara." He shook his head. "Just trying to understand the situation. This man he know about your accident. He doesn't even know I was on that stagecoach. The last letter I sent was from Kansas City telling him I'd arrive on the 15th. Today's the 16th. I know." Clara stared at the fire, watching the flames dance. "He's probably wondering where I am. Or maybe he's decided I changed my mind." "Did you—" The question caught her off guard. "Did I what?" "Change your mind." Eli's gaze was steady, unreadable. "About marrying him." "I don't have that luxury, Mr. Dawson. I have no family, no home, and no money. Thomas Whitfield offered me a respectable life and a roof over my head. That's more than most women in my position can hope for." "That's not what I asked." Clara felt her temper flare hot and unexpected. What does it matter what I want? I'm 26 years old, alone in the world, and now I've got a broken leg and a ruined dress, and I'm stranded in a cabin with a stranger while the man I'm supposed to marry thinks I've abandoned him. What I want doesn't enter into it. Eli was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry. The fight went out of her as quickly as it had come. No, I'm sorry. You saved my life and I'm snapping at you like a wounded animal. That's not fair. You are wounded and scared. You're allowed to snap. He almost smiled. Just try not to bite too hard. Despite everything, Clara felt her lips twitch. I'll do my best. The storm raged on outside, rain hammering against the cabin's thin roof and wind whistling through gaps in the walls. But inside, the fire crackled warmly, and for the first time since the stagecoach had flipped, Clara felt something other than fear. Tell me about him, Eli said after a while. This Thomas Whitfield. Why? Because we're stuck here until the storm passes, and I'd rather talk than sit in silence. And because... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Because you're about to marry him, and you haven't smiled once while talking about it. Clara bristled. Not everyone shows affection the same way. No, they don't. But most people, when they talk about the person they're planning to spend their life with, they don't sound like they're discussing a business arrangement. Maybe that's because it is a business arrangement. The words came out sharper than she intended. He needs a wife to help run his store and keep his house. I need security and stability. We both get what we want. And love. Love is a fairy tale, Mr. Dawson. It's something young girls dream about before life teaches them better. Eli studied her for a long moment, and Clara had the uncomfortable feeling that he was seeing more than she wanted to show. How old were you? He asked quietly. What? When life taught you that lesson. How old were you? Clara's throat tightened. She didn't want to answer. She didn't want to think about Michael, about the way he'd smiled at her the morning before he rode off to war, about the telegram that came 6 months later. Regret to inform you. Killed in action. Body not recovered. 17, she heard herself say. I was 17. Eli nodded slowly, as if that explained something. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. Some things don't get smaller with time. They just get quieter. Clara looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his eyes that she recognized. A grief that had never fully healed. A wound that time had scarred over, but never truly closed. You lost someone too, she said. It wasn't a question. Eli's jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my brother, Jesse. He was 19. The war. The war. He stared into the fire, and Clara watched the flames reflect in his eyes. He was right beside me when the bullet took him. Died in my arms, calling for our mother. Eli? I couldn't save him. His voice was rough, cracked. I tried. God knows I tried. But there was too much blood, and the fighting was too heavy, and all I could do was hold him while he stopped swallowing hard. Clara didn't think. She just reached out her hand, finding his where it rested on his knee. His fingers were rough and calloused warm, despite the chill in the air. You were there, she said softly. He didn't die alone. That matters. Eli looked down at her hand on his, and something in his expression shifted, surprise maybe, or gratitude. I've never told anyone that before, he said. About holding him. About not being able to save him. Well, why not? Because saying it out loud makes it real. And if it's real, then I have to feel it. And if I feel it... He shook his head. I've spent 8 years running from that feeling, Clara. Riding from town to town, job to job, never staying long enough to put down roots. Because roots mean caring, and caring means losing. And I can't... His voice broke. I can't lose anyone else. Clara tightened her grip on his hand. So you just never let anyone in? It's easier that way. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting it looks lonely. Eli's laugh was hollow. You're one to talk. You're about to marry a man you don't love because it's easier than hoping for something more. The words stung because they were true. Maybe we're both cowards, Clara said quietly. Maybe we are. Eli finally met her eyes, and for a moment the walls between them seemed to thin. But at least we're honest cowards. Outside, thunder rolled across the prairie, and the rain continued to fall. Inside the cabin, Clara Morgan and Elijah Dawson sat in the flickering firelight, two broken people who had found each other in the middle of a storm. Neither of them knew it yet, but their lives were about to change forever. Clara woke to silence. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and glistening in the early morning light. She could hear birds singing outside, and the distant sound of water running the creek still swollen from the downpour. Eli was already up, moving around the cabin with quiet efficiency. He'd changed into dry clothes and looked more alert than she felt, though there were shadows under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept much. "Morning," he said when he saw she was awake. "How's the leg?" Clara shifted experimentally and winced. "Still broken." "Funny." But there was a hint of a smile in his voice. "I checked the creek. Water's going down, but the crossing's still too dangerous. We'll have to wait another day at least." Another day. Clara thought of Thomas waiting in Cold Spring, wondering, worrying. He's going to think I'm dead. We'll get word to him as soon as we can. There's a settlement about 15 miles east Millbrook. They've got a telegraph office. Once you're strong enough to travel, I can take you there. And then, Eli paused his back to her. Then you continue on to Cold Spring, to your husband. Something about the way he said it made Clara's chest tighten. Eli. A sound from outside cut her off. A small sound barely audible, but both of them froze. "Did you hear that?" Clara whispered. Eli was already moving toward the door, one hand resting on the revolver at his hip. "Stay quiet." He eased the door open, peering out into the morning light. Clara held her breath, every muscle tense. "Well, I'll be damned," Eli said softly. "What is it?" Instead of answering, he stepped outside. Clara heard his boots squelching in the mud, heard his voice low and gentle. "Hey there, it's all right. I'm not going to hurt you." Silence. Then a small voice trembling with fear. Are you going to leave me too?" Clara's heart clenched. A child. There was a child out there. Eli's response was immediate and fierce. "No, I'm not leaving you. Nobody's leaving you. Come here." More silence. Then footsteps, small ones, and the creak of the cabin door as Eli returned. He wasn't alone. In his arms was a boy no more than 8 years old. His clothes were torn and soaked, his face streaked with dirt and tears. He was shivering violently, clinging to Eli like a drowning man to a rope. "Clara, this is—" Eli looked down at the child. "What's your name, son?" "Jacob," the boy whispered. "Jacob Winters." "Clara, this is Jacob." Eli's voice was steady, but Clara could see the tension in his jaw. "Jacob, can you tell us what happened? Where's your family?" The boy's face crumpled. "Gone. They're all gone. The water took 'em. Mama, Papa, baby Sarah. They're all gone, and I couldn't find 'em, and I ran and—" He broke off sobbing, and Eli pulled him closer. One large hand cradling the back of the child's head. "It's all right," Eli murmured. "You're safe now. We've got you." Clara watched something shifting in her chest as this rough-guarded cowboy held a terrified child with a tenderness that took her breath away. This was who Eli Dawson really was, she realized. Not the walls he'd built, not the distance he maintained, but this man who couldn't ride past a trapped woman who couldn't turn away from a frightened boy. "Eli," she said softly. "Bring him here." Eli carried Jacob to the bedroll and settled him beside Clara. The boy was still shivering, his teeth chattering, and Clara didn't think she just opened her arms. Jacob hesitated for only a moment. Then he crawled into her embrace, pressing his face against her shoulder, his small body racked with sobs. "Shh," Clara whispered, stroking his wet hair. "Shh, sweetheart. You're safe. We've got you. You're not alone anymore." Over the child's head, her eyes met Eli's, and in that moment, something passed between them. A recognition, a connection, a shared understanding that went deeper than words. They were three strangers thrown together by chance and tragedy. A woman with a broken leg and a broken heart. A man running from a grief he couldn't face. And a boy who had lost everything. But somehow in this small cabin in the middle of nowhere, they had found each other, and none of their lives would ever be the same. Jacob cried himself to sleep in Clara's arms, his small body finally going limp with exhaustion. She held him close, feeling his heartbeat slow, his breathing even out, and something fierce and protective rose up in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. "He's burning up," she said quietly, pressing her hand to the boy's forehead. "Eli, he's got a fever." Eli was beside them in an instant, his rough palm replacing hers on Jacob's skin. His jaw tightened. "How bad?" "Bad enough. He must have been out in that storm all night. We need to get him to a doctor." Eli stood pacing the small cabin like a caged animal. "The creek's still too high to cross going west, but if we head east toward Millbrook..." "Can your horse carry all three of us?" "She'll have to." Clara looked down at Jacob's pale face, at the dark circles under his eyes, and the way he whimpered in his sleep. This child had watched his entire family get swept away. He'd spent the night alone, terrified, probably calling for parents who would never answer. "We can't wait," she said. "We leave now." Eli didn't argue. Within minutes he had the horse saddled and their meager supplies packed. When he came back for Clara, she was already trying to stand using the wall for support. "What do you think you're doing?" "Helping." "You're going to make that leg worse." He crossed to her in 2 strides, his hands firm on her shoulders. "Let me carry you." "I'm not helpless, Eli." "Nobody said you were." His voice softened. "But you're hurt, and there's a sick child who needs us to get him to town as fast as possible. This isn't the time for pride, Clara." She wanted to argue. She wanted to prove she could manage on her own the way she'd been managing for the past 9 years. But Eli was right, and they both knew it. "Fine," she relented. "But don't you dare drop me." "Wouldn't dream of it, ma'am." He lifted her like she weighed nothing, carrying her out to where his horse waited. The animal was a sturdy chestnut mare, patient and calm despite the chaos of the past 24 hours. "Her name's Penny," Eli said as he settled Clara sideways in the saddle. "She's carried me through worse than this. She's beautiful. She's stubborn as hell, but she's got heart." He almost smiled. "Reminds me of someone." Before Clara could respond, Eli went back for Jacob. The boy stirred when Eli picked him up, his eyes fluttering open. Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," Eli told him. "There's a town not far from here. They've got a doctor who can help you feel better." "I don't want to go." Jacob's voice cracked. "What if the water comes again? What if it takes you to..." Eli stopped walking. He crouched down so he was eye level with the boy, his expression serious but gentle. "Listen to me, Jacob. I know you're scared. You've got every right to be scared after what you've been through. But I'm going to make you a promise right now, and I don't make promises I can't keep." Jacob's eyes were huge in his pale face. "What promise?" "I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Not the water, not the storm, not anything. You understand? You're stuck with me now, whether you like it or not." "You mean it?" "I mean it." Jacob stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of deception. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because he nodded slowly and wrapped his thin arms around Eli's neck. "Okay," he whispered. "I believe you." Clara watched the exchange with a lump in her throat. This man, this rough, closed-off cowboy who claimed he couldn't let anyone in, had just promised a traumatized child that he wouldn't leave him. And he'd meant every word. "Who are you really, Elijah Dawson?" she wondered. "And why are you so determined to hide it?" The ride to Millbrook was slow and difficult. Eli walked beside Penny, leading her carefully over the muddy, debris-strewn terrain. Clara held Jacob in front of her, the boy's fevered body burning against her chest. "Talk to me," Eli said after they'd been traveling for about an hour. "Keep your mind off the pain. What do you want me to talk about?" "Anything. Tell me about Ohio. Tell me about your life before." Clara shifted Jacob's weight, grimacing as her leg throbbed. "There's not much to tell. My parents died when I was 16. Scarlet fever. I went to live with my aunt, worked on her farm until she passed 2 years ago. After that," she shrugged, "I answered Thomas's advertisement. It seemed like the practical thing to do. That's a lot of loss for one person. Everyone loses people. I'm not special." "Didn't say you were special." Eli glanced back at her. "Said you'd been through a lot. There's a difference." Clara didn't know how to respond to that. Most people either pitied her or dismissed her hardships as unremarkable. Eli did neither. He simply acknowledged her pain without making it define her. "What about you?" she asked. "Where's your family?" "Tennessee, last I heard. My mother's still there running the farm with my sister. I send money when I can." "But you don't visit." It wasn't a question, and Eli's silence confirmed it. "I can't," he said finally. "Every time I think about going back, I see Jesse's face. I hear him calling for Ma. And I just—" He shook his head. "I can't walk through that door and pretend everything's fine when nothing will ever be fine again." "Maybe they need you anyway. Maybe they're not looking for fine. Maybe they just want their son back." Eli's step faltered. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Clara's voice sharpened. "I spent 3 years wishing someone would come home to me. Anyone. I used to lie awake at night imagining what I'd say if Michael walked through the door. I didn't need him to fix anything or make everything better. I just needed him to be there. Michael. The one you lost. The one I loved. The only one I ever loved." She swallowed hard. "He promised he'd come back. He promised we'd get married and have a little farm and grow old together. And then he died in some godforsaken field in Virginia, and I never even got to say goodbye." Jacob stirred in her arms, murmuring something unintelligible, and Clara held him tighter. "So yes," she continued, her voice thick, "I do know what I'm talking about. Your mother lost a son, Eli. Don't make her lose two." Eli didn't respond, but Clara saw the way his shoulders tightened, the way his jaw clenched, and she knew her words had hit their mark. They traveled in silence after that, the only sounds the squelch of hooves in mud and Jacob's labored breathing. Clara watched the back of Eli's head and wondered if she'd pushed too hard, said too much. Then, without turning around, Eli spoke. His favorite color was blue. Jesse's, I mean. He used to say it reminded him of the sky on summer mornings before the day got too hot. Every birthday, every Christmas, I'd find something blue to give him. A bandana, a marble once I saved up for 3 months to buy him a blue-handled pocket knife. He paused. He was carrying it when he died. I tried to take it to bring it home to Ma, but there was too much. There was too much blood. I couldn't get it clean. Clara's heart broke for him. Eli, I kept trying. Even after they buried him, I kept trying to get that knife clean. Like if I could just get rid of the blood, it would mean it hadn't really happened. His voice cracked. It took me 2 years to stop dreaming about it. Do you still have it? The knife? I threw it in a river outside of Kansas City. Couldn't bear to look at it anymore. He finally glanced back, and his eyes were red-rimmed. Does that make me a coward? It makes you human. Before he could respond, Jacob suddenly jerked in Clara's arms, his whole body convulsing. Eli! Clara cried. Something's wrong. Eli was at her side instantly, his hands reaching for the boy. Jacob's eyes had rolled back, his limbs twitching uncontrollably, foam flecking his lips. He's seizing. The fever's too high. Eli's voice was tight with fear. We need to cool him down. Now. There's nothing here, no water, no... There. Eli pointed ahead, where a small stream cut across the path. Hold him steady. I'm going to carry you both to the water. He lifted Clara from the saddle with Jacob still in her arms, moving with a speed that belied his careful demeanor. They reached the stream in seconds, and Eli waded in without hesitation, the cold water soaking them all. Keep his head above water, Eli instructed, helping Clara lower Jacob into the shallow stream. The boy's convulsions began to ease almost immediately, the cold shocking his system back into some semblance of normal. That's it, Clara murmured, cradling Jacob's head. That's it, sweetheart. Come back to us. You're okay. You're going to be okay. Jacob's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. Mama. Clara's throat closed. No, honey, it's Clara. Do you remember me? The boy blinked, clarity slowly returning. The lady with the broken leg. That's right. She managed to smile despite the tears burning her eyes. And Eli's here too. We're going to take care of you. I thought... Jacob's voice was barely a whisper. I thought I was dying. I thought I was going to see Mama and Papa again. Not today. Eli's voice was fierce. You hear me, Jacob? Not today, and not for a long, long time. You've got too much living left to do. They stayed in the stream until Jacob's fever broke enough to make travel safe again. Clara was soaked, her teeth chattering her broken leg, screaming in protest. But she didn't complain. She couldn't not, when this child had come so close to slipping away. You saved his life, she told Eli as he carried her back to the horse. If we hadn't stopped when we did. We both saved him. Eli's arms tightened around her. You kept him calm. That matters more than you know. We make a good team. The words slipped out before she could stop them, and Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks despite the cold. Eli looked at her, really looked at her, and something passed between them. Something dangerous, something that had no business existing between a woman engaged to another man and a cowboy who wouldn't stay in one place. Yeah, he said softly. I reckon we do. The moment stretched taut and trembling with possibility. Then Jacob coughed, breaking the spell, and Eli turned away to settle them both back on the horse. But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Something fundamental. Something that would change everything. Millbrook appeared on the horizon, just as the sun began its descent. It was a small town, barely more than a main street, with a general store, a church, a saloon, and a handful of houses scattered around the edges. There, Eli said, pointing to a building with a wooden sign. Doctor's office. Let's get Jacob inside. They caused a stir as they rode in. A mud-covered cowboy leading a horse carrying a soaked woman with a splinted leg and a half-conscious child wasn't exactly a common sight. People stopped to stare. Whispers followed them down the street. Mind your business, Eli muttered under his breath, and Clara would have laughed if she hadn't been so exhausted. The doctor was a gruff, no-nonsense man named Samuel Hayes. He took one look at their bedraggled group and ushered them inside without a word. Boy first, he said, lifting Jacob from Clara's arms. What happened? We found him after the storm, Eli explained. His family. Gone. Jacob's voice was small and broken. The water took them. Dr. Hayes's expression softened for just a moment. I'm sorry, son. Let's get you fixed up all right. You're safe here. While the doctor examined Jacob, Eli helped Clara to a chair and knelt beside her. How's the leg? I'll live. She tried to smile. Though I'm starting to think this trip is cursed. Not cursed. Eli shook his head. Just complicated. That's one word for it. The door to the examination room opened and Dr. Hayes emerged. His face was grave. The boy has pneumonia. It's early stages, but he's weak. He'll need at least 2 weeks of rest and medicine before he's fit to travel. 2 weeks. Clara closed her eyes. Thomas. She was supposed to be married to Thomas by now. There's a boarding house at the end of the street, Dr. Hayes continued. Mrs. Kincaid runs it. She's a good woman. She'll take care of you while you recover. He looked at Clara's leg. I'll want to check that splint too. Your friend did decent work, but it needs proper bandaging. He's not my... Clara started, then stopped. What was Eli to her? A rescuer? A friend? Something more. I'll see to the arrangements, Eli said, standing. Clara, will you be all right here for a few minutes? Of course. Go! He hesitated like he wanted to say something else, but in the end, he just nodded and walked out. Clara watched him go, an ache spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with her broken leg. Mrs. Kincaid turned out to be a formidable woman in her 50s, steel gray hair pinned severely back, sharp eyes that missed nothing, and a manner that brooked no nonsense. So, she said, looking Clara up and down after Eli had explained their situation. A mail-order bride with a broken leg, a cowboy who found her in a flood, and an orphaned boy. That's quite a story. It's been quite a week, Clara admitted. I imagine so. Mrs. Kincaid's expression softened slightly. Well, you're welcome here as long as you need to stay. I've got a room on the first floor easier for you with that leg. The boy can stay there too if you're willing to look after him. Clara didn't hesitate. Of course I am. And Mr. Dawson. Mrs. Kincaid's eyes flicked to Eli. Where will you be staying? The livery, I reckon, or the saloon if they've got rooms. They do. Though I should warn you the saloon attracts a rough crowd, especially on Saturday nights. I can handle myself, ma'am. I'm sure you can. Mrs. Kincaid studied him for a moment, then nodded. Dinner's at 6. Both of you are welcome. I don't stand for tardiness. Once they were alone in Clara's room, Jacob had been settled in a small cot by the window. Eli lingered by the door. I should go. Let you rest. Eli, wait. He stopped his hand on the doorframe. Thank you, Clara said. For everything. For finding me, for saving Jacob, for... She gestured around. For all of this. I don't know how I can ever repay you. You don't owe me anything, Clara. I owe you my life. No. He turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. You were fighting to survive long before I showed up. You would have found a way. You're not the kind of woman who gives up. You don't know that. Yes, I do. He took a step closer. I've known a lot of people, Clara. Good ones, bad ones, and everything in between. And I can count on one hand the number who would have held a dying child in their arms and promised him he wasn't alone. You did that. You did that without thinking, without hesitating. That's not someone who gives up. That's someone who fights. Clara's eyes burned with unshed tears. Eli, get some rest. His voice was rough. I'll come by tomorrow to check on you and Jacob. Will you stay in Millbrook, at least until... She couldn't finish the sentence. Until what? Until she left for Cold Spring. Until she married Thomas. I'll stay as long as you need me. Eli's gaze held hers. That's a promise. He was gone before she could respond, the door closing softly behind him. Clara lay back against the pillows, her mind racing. Her leg throbbed, her heart ached, and somewhere deep inside a truth she'd been trying to ignore was becoming impossible to deny. She was falling for Elijah Dawson, and in 3 days she was supposed to marry another man. The next morning brought a telegram from Cold Spring. Clara's hands trembled as she unfolded the paper, already dreading its contents. Miss Morgan, stop, greatly relieved to hear you are safe. Stop. Understand circumstances require delay. Stop, will wait as long as necessary. Stop. Please advise when to expect arrival. Stop. Regards, Thomas Whitfield. Good news, Eli asked. He'd arrived just as the telegram was delivered, a cup of coffee in each hand. He's willing to wait. Clara stared at the words. He says he'll wait as long as necessary. That's good, isn't it? Yes, it's very good. She folded the telegram carefully. He's a good man, Eli. Practical, patient. He'll make a fine husband. Then why do you look like someone just told you your dog died? Clara's head snapped up. I don't. You do. Eli set the coffee down and crossed his arms. Clara, I've spent 3 days watching you talk about this man. You've never once said you want to marry him, only that you should, only that it's practical. What's wrong with practical? Practical keeps you fed. Practical keeps a roof over your head. Practical also keeps you trapped in a life that makes you miserable. You don't know that I'll be miserable. And you don't know that you won't be. They glared at each other, the air between them crackling with tension. Why do you care? Clara demanded. Why does it matter to you whether I marry Thomas Whitfield or not? Eli opened his mouth, closed it. For a long moment he just stood there, looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. Because, he said finally, his voice low and rough, you deserve more than practical Clara Morgan. You deserve someone who looks at you like you're the only thing in the world worth seeing. You deserve to be loved, not just needed. And you think Thomas can't give me that? I think you already know the answer to that question. The words hung between them, heavy and charged. Before Clara could respond, a small voice interrupted. Are you fighting? They both turned. Jacob was sitting up in his cot, his pale face anxious. No, sweetheart. Clara forced a smile. We're just talking. It sounded like fighting. Jacob's lower lip trembled. Please don't fight. Mama and Papa used to fight sometimes, and then the water came, and now they're gone, and I don't want you to be gone too. Clara's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. She held out her arms, and Jacob scrambled across the room to climb into her lap. We're not going anywhere, she promised, holding him tight. Neither of us. Right, Eli? Eli's expression softened as he looked at the boy. That's right. You're stuck with us, remember? I made you a promise. But the Lady Clara, she has to go marry somebody else. Jacob's voice was muffled against Clara's shoulder. She has to leave. Clara met Eli's eyes over the boy's head. The question hung unspoken between them. Does she? Let's not worry about that right now, Clara said softly. Right now, we're all here together. That's what matters. Jacob nodded, sniffling. Can we stay like this forever? Clara stroked his hair, her heart aching. I wish we could, sweetheart. I wish we could. But even as she said the words, she knew they couldn't last. The storm might have thrown them together, but reality was waiting. And reality had a way of tearing apart everything you thought you'd found. What Clara didn't know, what none of them knew, was that reality was about to arrive much sooner than expected. Because at that very moment, a man on a gray horse was riding into Millbrook. A man who had received a telegram 3 days ago and decided that waiting wasn't in his nature. A man named Thomas Whitfield, and he had come to claim his bride. The knock on the door was sharp, businesslike. Clara knew before she even opened it that something had changed. Mrs. Kincaid stood in the hallway, her expression unreadable. You have a visitor, Miss Morgan. A gentleman from Cold Spring. Clara's blood turned to ice. Thomas, he's here. Waiting in the parlor. He's been asking questions about you. Mrs. Kincaid paused. And about Mr. Dawson. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked at Jacob, who had fallen back asleep after his earlier outburst, then at Eli, who had gone very still. "I'll come with you," Eli said. "No." Clara shook her head. "This is something I need to handle alone." "Clara." "Please, Eli, just stay with Jacob. I'll be fine." She didn't wait for his response. Using the crutch Dr. Hayes had provided, she made her way down the hall to the parlor, each step feeling like a march toward her own execution. Thomas Whitfield was standing by the window when she entered. He turned at the sound of her crutch, and Clara got her first look at the man she'd promised to marry. He was older than his letters had suggested, mid-40s perhaps, with graying hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His clothes were expensive and well-fitted, his posture rigid with the confidence of a successful businessman. But his eyes, pale and assessing, held none of the warmth his words had conveyed. "Miss Morgan." He crossed the room in 3 quick strides. "Thank God you're safe. When I received word of the stagecoach accident, I feared the worst." "Mr. Whitfield, I wasn't expecting you." "Clearly." His gaze swept over her, taking in her borrowed dress, her splinted leg, her disheveled hair. "You've had quite an ordeal." "Yes, the storm was unexpected." "So I've heard." Thomas's expression hardened, almost imperceptibly. "I've also heard that you arrived in town with a man. A cowboy, they say, and a child." Clara's chin lifted. "Mr. Dawson saved my life. He found me after the stagecoach overturned and carried me to safety. The boy Jacob lost his family in the flood. We couldn't leave him." "We." Thomas repeated the word slowly, like he was tasting something bitter. "You speak as if you and this cowboy are a unit." "We've been through a lot together in a very short time." "I can see that." Thomas moved closer, and Clara resisted the urge to step back. The people in this town seem quite taken with the romantic tale of the mysterious stranger who rescued the stranded bride. The doctor's wife couldn't stop talking about how devoted Mr. Dawson has been, how he visits you every morning, how he brings you coffee. "He's been kind." "Kind." Thomas's voice dropped, all pretense of warmth disappearing. "Let me be clear, Miss Morgan. I did not travel 300 miles to find my intended bride being tended to by another man. I did not spend 8 months corresponding with you, arranging our home, preparing for our life together, only to discover that you've developed an attachment to some drifter." "Mr. Whitfield." "I am not finished." His tone brooked no argument. "I understand that you are in a vulnerable situation. I understand that gratitude can sometimes be confused with deeper feelings. But let me remind you of the facts. You are alone in the world. You have no family, no money, and no prospects. I am offering you stability, security, a respectable life. Can this cowboy offer you the same?" Clara's hands trembled on her crutch. "I never said—" "You didn't have to. I see the way you tense when I speak of him. I see the guilt in your eyes." Thomas stepped closer still, until she could smell his cologne expensive cloying. "I am not a jealous man, Miss Morgan. But I am a practical one. And practically speaking, you belong with me. Not with some homeless wanderer who'll move on the moment something shinier catches his eye. You don't know him. Neither do you, not really. You've known him for what a week I've been writing to you for 8 months. I've shared my hopes, my plans, my vision for our future. What has he shared? A few campfire stories, a heroic rescue that any decent man would have performed. The worst part was that Thomas wasn't wrong. Not entirely. Clara had known Eli for barely a week. She didn't know his favorite food, his childhood memories, his dreams for the future. She knew only that he made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. But was that enough? Was it enough to throw away the security Thomas offered? "I need time," she heard herself say. "My leg isn't healed yet, and Jacob—" "The boy is not your responsibility. He has no one else. Then we'll find someone to take him in. An orphanage, perhaps. There are institutions for children like him." Clara's blood ran cold. "He is not going to an orphanage." "Miss Morgan." His name is Jacob. He's 8 years old. He watched his entire family drown. And you want to ship him off to an institution like he's a piece of unwanted furniture? Thomas's eyes narrowed. You're becoming emotional. I'm becoming honest. Something I should have been from the start. Clara straightened, ignoring the pain in her leg. I agreed to marry you because I thought security was enough. I thought a practical arrangement was all I deserved. But these past few days have shown me that I want more than practical, Mr. Whitfield. I want to be with someone who sees me as more than a business transaction. And you think this cowboy sees you that way? I think he sees me as a person, not a commodity. Thomas's face flushed with anger. You're making a mistake, Miss Morgan. A very foolish mistake. When he leaves, and he will leave, mark my words, you'll have nothing. No home, no husband, no future, and I won't be waiting to pick up the pieces. Then don't wait. The words came out stronger than Clara expected, and for a moment she saw something flicker in Thomas's eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. Then it was gone, replaced by cold fury. Very well. If that's your decision, I won't waste any more of my time. He straightened his jacket. Good day, Miss Morgan. I hope you don't come to regret this. He was halfway to the door when Clara spoke again. Mr. Whitfield. He paused but didn't turn around. Thank you for being honest about what you wanted. It helped me see what I didn't. Thomas left without another word. Clara stood alone in the parlor, her heart pounding, her mind reeling. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. She'd thrown away her only chance at security for... what? A man who might not even feel the same way. A future built on nothing but hope. That took guts. She spun around too fast, her broken leg screaming in protest. Eli was standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. You heard? Most of it. He moved into the room, his boots silent on the wooden floor. He's right about one thing, you know. Clara's heart sank. What? I can't offer you what he can. I've got no home, no steady income, nothing but a horse and whatever I can carry in my saddlebags. Eli stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his gray-blue eyes. But he's wrong about something, too. What's that? I'm not going anywhere. Eli reached out his calloused fingers, brushing her cheek. Not unless you ask me to. Eli, I know it's crazy. I know we've only known each other a week. I know I've spent the last 8 years running from anything that looked like roots, or commitment, or home. His voice cracked. But then I found you in that flood, Clara, and something changed. You changed me. Jacob changed me. For the first time in years, I don't want to run. I want to stay. Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you. The words came out raw and honest. I'm saying I want to build something with you, a life, a family, whatever that looks like. I'm saying that if you'll have me, I'll spend every day proving that you made the right choice. Clara opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, a scream cut through the air. Jacob. They both moved at once, Eli catching Clara as her leg buckled, half carrying her down the hall to her room. The door was open, and inside, Jacob was sitting up in bed, his face contorted with terror. They're coming, he screamed. The water's coming. It's going to take us all. Clara reached him first, pulling him into her arms. Shh, sweetheart. It's just a dream. You're safe. No, no, no. I saw them. I saw Mama and Papa and Sarah under the water, and their eyes were open, but they couldn't see me, and I tried to grab them, but they kept floating away. Jacob, look at me. Eli crouched beside the bed, his voice firm but gentle. Look at me, son. The boy's wild eyes found Eli's face. You're here, in Millbrook, in a warm, dry room. There's no water, no flood, just us. Eli took the boy's hand, pressing it against his own chest. Feel that my heart's beating. I'm real. Clara's real. We're all safe. Jacob's breathing began to slow. You promise. I promise. Eli glanced at Clara, then back at the boy. And I've got some news that might make you feel better. What news? Eli hesitated for just a moment. Then, Clara's going to stay with us. She's not going to marry that other man. Jacob's eyes went wide. Really? You're going to stay? Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face. Really? I'm staying. Does that mean? Jacob looked between them hopefully. Does that mean we can be a family? A real family? Clara's heart swelled. She looked at Eli, saw the same hope and fear and longing reflected in his eyes. I think, Eli said slowly, that's exactly what it means. Jacob threw his arms around both of them, pulling them into a fierce, desperate hug. Clara buried her face in Eli's shoulder, feeling his arm wrap around her, feeling Jacob's small body warm between them. For the first time in 9 years, Clara Morgan felt like she belonged somewhere. The peace lasted exactly 3 hours. Clara was dozing in the chair beside Jacob's bed when the commotion started. Raised voices from downstairs, heavy footsteps on the stairs, and then Mrs. Kincaid's sharp voice cutting through the noise. You cannot just barge in here. This is a respectable establishment. Ma'am, I don't mean any disrespect, but I've got orders. Clara's door burst open, and 2 men in dusty riding clothes stood in the doorway. Behind them, Mrs. Kincaid looked furious. What is the meaning of this? Clara demanded, pulling Jacob closer. The larger of the 2 men stepped forward. Are you Clara Morgan? Who's asking? Name's Garrett. I work for Thomas Whitfield. The man's eyes were cold. Mr. Whitfield sent us to deliver a message. Eli appeared in the doorway, his hand resting on his revolver. Whatever message you've got, you can give it to me. These folks don't need any trouble. Garrett looked Eli up and down dismissively. You must be the cowboy. Don't worry, friend. We're not here for a fight, just delivering information. He turned back to Clara. Mr. Whitfield wanted you to know that he's been making inquiries about you, about your friend here, and about that boy. Clara's blood ran cold. What kind of inquiries? Well, for starters, he found out that your cowboy here has a warrant out for his arrest in Kansas, something about a bar fight that went wrong. Clara looked at Eli. His face had gone pale. That was self-defense, Eli said quietly. The man pulled a knife. Maybe so, but the law in Abilene sees it different. And Mr. Whitfield, being a law-abiding citizen, feels it's his duty to report your whereabouts to the proper authorities. That's blackmail, Clara spat. That's justice, ma'am. Garrett smiled, showing yellowed teeth. Mr. Whitfield also wanted me to mention that he's been in contact with the state about the boy. Turns out, there's a process for orphans like him. Foster families, institutions, that sort of thing. Mr. Whitfield knows some folks who'd be happy to take the boy off your hands. No! Jacob screamed, clinging to Clara. I won't go. You can't make me. Take it easy, boy. Nothing's decided yet. Garrett's smile widened. But Mr. Whitfield wanted you both to understand your options. Miss Morgan goes back to Cold Spring, marries him like she agreed, and all of this goes away. The warrant, the inquiries about the boy, everything. Or she stays here with her cowboy and, well, he shrugged. Things might get complicated. Eli stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. You've delivered your message. Now get out. Garrett held up his hands in mock surrender. No need for hostility, friend. We're leaving. He tipped his hat to Clara. You've got until tomorrow morning to decide, Miss Morgan. Mr. Whitfield will be expecting your answer. They left as quickly as they'd come, their boots echoing down the stairs. Clara sat frozen, her mind racing. Jacob still clutched in her arms. Clara, Eli's voice was strained. The warrant, I should have told you. Is it true? Did you kill someone? No. Eli shook his head vehemently. I hit him. He pulled a knife. I defended myself. He went down, hit his head on the bar. He lived, but he was a wealthy man's son. They wanted someone to pay. He ran a hand through his hair. I've been running from that warrant for 2 years. I thought if I just kept moving it would go away. And now Thomas is using it against you. Against us. I'll leave. The words came out flat, defeated. If I'm gone, he's got nothing to hold over you. You and Jacob can figure something out. No. Clara's voice was fierce. You promised you wouldn't leave. You promised Jacob. Clara, I can't let you sacrifice everything for me. This isn't about you. She stood, ignoring the pain in her leg. This is about a man who thinks he can control people through fear and manipulation. This is about him threatening to take Jacob away from us just because I wouldn't be his obedient little wife. So what do we do? Clara looked at Jacob, who was watching them with wide, terrified eyes. She looked at Eli, the man she loved, the man who had saved her life and stolen her heart. We fight, she said. Together. Eli stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly a smile spread across his face. I always knew there was a reason I pulled you out of that flood. And what reason is that? Because you're the bravest damn woman I've ever met, and I'm never going to let anyone take you or Jacob away from me. He pulled her into his arms, and Clara held on tight, knowing that the battle ahead would be the hardest she'd ever faced. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't facing it alone. The next morning came too quickly. Clara hadn't slept. She'd spent the night holding Jacob, watching Eli pace the room, and trying to formulate a plan that didn't end with her marrying Thomas or losing everyone she loved. Just before dawn, there was a soft knock on the door. Eli had his gun drawn before Clara could blink. Who's there? Reverend Pritchard. Mrs. Kincaid told me about your situation. Clara nodded at Eli, and he opened the door cautiously. The man who entered was not what Clara expected. He was black, in his late 50s, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that seemed at odds with the tension in the room. I heard what Thomas Whitfield is trying to do, Reverend Pritchard said, settling into the chair Clara offered. I've known men like him my whole life. Men who think power gives them the right to control others. Do you have a suggestion? Eli asked, his voice guarded. I might, the Reverend smiled. How would you two feel about getting married today? Clara stared at the Reverend, certain she had misheard. Married today. It's the only way to protect you both legally. Reverend Pritchard leaned forward. If you're Eli's wife, Thomas Whitfield has no claim on you. You're not his intended anymore. You're another man's wife. And as for Jacob, a married couple has a much stronger case for adoption than a single woman traveling with a stranger. But the warrant, Eli said. If I'm arrested, let me worry about that. The Reverend's eyes held a knowing glint. I've been in this territory a long time, Mr. Dawson. I know people, good people who understand that the law isn't always justice. That warrant is 2 years old from a state hundreds of miles away. If you're a married man settled down with a wife and a son to support well, that changes things. Clara's head was spinning. 24 hours ago, she'd been engaged to Thomas Whitfield. Now, she was being asked to marry a different man entirely. Eli. She turned to face him. We talked about building a life together, but this is so fast. I know. Eli took her hands in his. And if you need more time, I understand. We can find another way. I won't pressure you into anything you're not ready for. That's not what I'm saying. Clara squeezed his fingers. I'm saying I never imagined I'd get married in a borrowed dress with a broken leg and a child watching. Is that a yes? Clara looked at Jacob, who was watching them with bated breath. She looked at Reverend Pritchard, who waited patiently. She looked at Eli, this man who had carried her through a flood, who had promised a traumatized child he would never leave, who had told her she deserved more than practical. Yes, she whispered. It's a yes. Jacob whooped with joy, throwing his arms around both of them. Even Reverend Pritchard smiled, the stern lines of his face softening. Then we'd better get moving, the Reverend said. Thomas Whitfield's deadline is noon. We'll have you married by 10. The next 2 hours passed in a blur. Mrs. Kincaid, upon hearing the news, threw herself into preparations with the fervor of a general commanding troops. She produced a white cotton dress from somewhere, not a wedding gown, but clean and pretty enough for the occasion. She braided Clara's hair pinched color into her pale cheeks and declared her fit to be a bride. "You're a good woman, Mrs. Kincaid," Clara said, catching the older woman's hand. "Thank you for everything." "Nonsense." But Mrs. Kincaid's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Just promise me you'll be happy. Lord knows you deserve it." Dr. Hayes came to check Clara's leg one final time and ended up staying for the ceremony. His wife brought flowers from her garden. The telegraph operator, a young man named Billy, who had clearly developed a crush on Clara, offered to serve as a witness. By 9:30, they were all gathered in the small chapel at the edge of town. Clara stood at the altar, leaning on her crutch, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Jacob stood beside her, clutching a handful of wildflowers he'd picked that morning. And Eli. Eli looked at her like she was the sunrise after the longest night of his life. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Pritchard began, "we are gathered here today." The chapel door burst open. Thomas Whitfield strode in, his face contorted with rage. Behind him came Garrett and the other man from yesterday, their hands resting on their gun belts. "This ceremony will not proceed," Thomas declared. "This woman is promised to me." Clara's stomach dropped, but Eli stepped forward, positioning himself between her and Thomas. "She made her choice," Eli said quietly. "It wasn't you." "Her choice was made under duress. She doesn't know what she wants." "I know exactly what I want." Clara's voice rang out clear and strong. "And it isn't you, Mr. Whitfield. It never was. I was willing to settle for a life without love because I thought that was all I deserved. But I was wrong." Thomas's face twisted. "You ungrateful little—" "That's enough." Reverend Pritchard stepped forward, his presence suddenly commanding. "You are in the house of God, Mr. Whitfield. Whatever grievances you have, this is not the place for them. Don't lecture me about God, old man. I know what you are. I know where you came from." The chapel went deadly silent. Reverend Pritchard didn't flinch. "Yes, Mr. Whitfield. You know I was born a slave in Louisiana. You know I taught myself to read using a stolen Bible. You know I walked to freedom and spent 30 years building a life that men like you said I didn't deserve." His voice hardened. "And you know that I have married hundreds of couples in this territory, including the territorial governor's daughter. My authority is not in question here. Yours is." Thomas's face reddened. "You can't speak to me that way." "I just did." The Reverend turned back to Clara and Eli. "Now where were we? Ah, yes, dearly beloved." "I said stop." Thomas lunged forward, but before he could reach the altar, 3 men stepped into his path. Dr. Hayes, Billy the telegraph operator, and to Clara's shock, the sheriff of Millbrook, who had slipped in through a side door. "Thomas Whitfield." The sheriff's voice was calm but firm. "I received an interesting telegram this morning from the governor's office in Kansas." Thomas went pale. "What telegram?" "Seems someone—" The sheriff glanced at Reverend Pritchard. "Informed them that you've been threatening a witness with an old warrant in order to coerce a woman into marriage. That's extortion, Mr. Whitfield. A felony." "That's ridiculous. You were simply leaving." The sheriff stepped closer. "The warrant against Mr. Dawson has been reviewed and dismissed. Self-defense, they concluded once they actually looked at the evidence. Apparently, the original investigation was influenced by the victim's wealthy father, who I'm told passed away last year." Clara watched the color drain from Thomas's face. "That's impossible." "Nothing's impossible when you know the right people." The sheriff smiled grimly. "Now you can leave peacefully, or I can arrest you for extortion and disrupting a religious ceremony. Your choice." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then Thomas straightened his jacket, his expression hardening into something ugly and cold. "This isn't over." "Yes," Clara said quietly. "It is." Thomas stared at her, and for just a moment she saw something besides anger in his eyes, something almost like regret. Then it was gone, replaced by contempt. "You'll regret this," he said. "Both of you." He turned and walked out, Garrett and the other man following. The chapel door swung shut behind them, and the tension in the room broke like a fever. "Well," Reverend Pritchard said mildly, "that was dramatic. Shall we continue?" Despite everything, Clara laughed. It bubbled up from somewhere deep inside her, and once she started, she couldn't stop. Eli was laughing too, and Jacob and even Mrs. Kincaid was dabbing at her eyes while trying to suppress a smile. "Yes," Clara managed between giggles. "Please continue." The ceremony that followed was simple and brief. There were no elaborate vows, no expensive rings. Eli had fashioned a band from a piece of copper wire, promising to replace it with something proper as soon as he could. "I don't need proper," Clara told him. "I just need you." When Reverend Pritchard pronounced them husband and wife, Eli kissed her with a tenderness that took her breath away. Jacob cheered. Mrs. Kincaid wept openly. And Clara Morgan, now Clara Dawson, felt something she hadn't felt in 9 long years. Hope. The celebration afterward was modest but joyful. Mrs. Kincaid had prepared a small feast, and the townsfolk who had witnessed the confrontation with Thomas seemed eager to welcome the newlyweds into their community. "To Mr. and Mrs. Dawson," Dr. Hayes said, raising his glass. "May your life together be filled with more joy than sorrow, more love than fear, and more laughter than tears. And may your children be as brave as their parents," Mrs. Kincaid added, winking at Jacob. Jacob beamed. "Does this mean I can call you Ma and Pa now?" Clara's throat tightened. She looked at Eli, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "If you want to," Clara said softly. "We'd like that very much." Jacob threw his arms around her. "I knew it. I knew you'd be my family. I knew it from the first moment Eli pulled me out of that tree." "What tree?" Clara asked, confused. Jacob pulled back, his face suddenly uncertain. "The tree where I was hiding. After the water took everyone. I climbed up a tree and stayed there all night. I thought I was going to die. And then Eli found me." Clara looked at her new husband. "You didn't tell me that part." Eli shifted uncomfortably. "It didn't seem important." "You climbed a tree in the middle of a flood to save a child you'd never met. How is that not important?" "I did what anyone would have done." "No." Clara shook her head firmly. "You did what you would have done, what you did for me, what you keep doing for everyone who needs you." She took his hand. "You're a good man, Elijah Dawson. Stop running from that." Something shifted in Eli's expression. For a moment, he looked lost, vulnerable, like a boy who'd been told he was worth something for the first time. Then he cleared his throat and pulled her into his arms. "I love you," he murmured against her hair. "I don't deserve you, but I love you." "You deserve everything," she whispered back. "And I'm going to spend the rest of our lives proving it to you." The afternoon faded into evening, and eventually the guests departed, leaving Clara, Eli, and Jacob alone in their room at the boarding house. Jacob fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the excitement of the day. Clara watched him for a long moment, this child, who had lost everything and somehow found them. "He's ours now," she said quietly. "Really ours. If the courts agree." Eli came to stand beside her. Reverend Pritchard said he'd help with the adoption papers, but it could take months. "We'll wait, however long it takes." Eli nodded, then turned to face her. "Clara, about tonight." "Eli." She stopped him with a finger on his lips. "I have a broken leg. You have a warrant that was just dismissed, and we have an 8-year-old boy sleeping 3 feet away. Tonight we rest. Tomorrow we start our life together. All the other stuff." She smiled. "We have time." Relief and gratitude flooded Eli's features. "Have I mentioned that I love you?" "Once or twice. Feel free to keep mentioning it." He pulled her close, and they stood together watching Jacob sleep, feeling the weight of the day slowly lift from their shoulders. Clara was almost asleep herself when a knock came at the door. Eli tensed immediately, his hand moving to the gun he'd set aside. But the voice that followed was familiar. "It's Reverend Pritchard. I need to speak with you. It's urgent." Eli opened the door, and the Reverend slipped inside. His face was grave. "What's wrong?" Clara asked, her heart sinking. "I just received word from a contact in Cold Spring. Thomas Whitfield didn't go home." "Where did he go?" The Reverend hesitated. "He's heading to Denver, to the territorial court. He's filed a petition claiming that Jacob is his ward, that you kidnapped the boy and are holding him against his will." Clara's blood ran cold. "That's insane. We saved Jacob. I know. But Thomas has money, and money buys lawyers. Good lawyers. The kind who can make lies sound like truth." The Reverend took a deep breath. "There's a hearing scheduled for 3 days from now. If you don't appear, Thomas wins by default. Jacob becomes his ward, and he can do whatever he wants with the boy." "Then we'll appear," Eli said grimly. "We'll fight this. You'll need witnesses, people who can testify to what really happened." "We have witnesses. Dr. Hayes, Mrs. Kincaid." "You'll need more than that. You'll need someone who saw the flood, someone who can confirm that Jacob's family is really gone." The Reverend paused. "Someone who can prove that Thomas Whitfield is lying." Clara's mind raced. "The other passengers from the stagecoach, the ones who left me behind. They saw what happened. Do you know where they are?" "They were walking toward Denver when the flood." Clara shook her head. "I don't know, but someone must have seen them. Someone must know what happened." "Then we need to find them." Eli grabbed his hat. "I'll ride out tonight. Start asking questions." "You can't." Clara caught his arm. "The hearing is in 3 days. Denver is a full day's ride from here. You won't have time to find witnesses and get back." "I'll find a way." "Eli." "Clara, listen to me." He cupped her face in his hands. "I made a promise to that boy. I told him I wouldn't let anyone take him away. I meant it. I don't care if I have to ride to hell and back. I'm not letting Thomas Whitfield win." Tears streamed down Clara's cheeks. "Then I'm coming with you. Your leg. My leg is healing. I can ride if I have to." She straightened her spine. "We started this together, Eli. We're finishing it together." For a long moment, Eli just looked at her. Then he nodded slowly. "Together." Reverend Pritchard cleared his throat. "I'll stay here with Jacob. Mrs. Kincaid and Dr. Hayes will help me look after him. You two focus on finding those witnesses." "Thank you," Clara said, "for everything. Why are you helping us? You barely know us." The Reverend smiled sadly. "Because I know what it's like to have everything taken from you by men who think their power makes them right. Because I spent 30 years fighting for a life that others said I didn't deserve. And because that boy—" He nodded toward Jacob's sleeping form. "That boy reminds me of myself. Alone, scared, with nowhere to go. I couldn't save myself when I was his age. But maybe I can help save him." Clara crossed the room and embraced the older man. "You're a good man, Reverend." "I try to be." He patted her back. "Now go. You've got a long ride ahead, and the clock is ticking." They left before dawn. Clara rode behind Eli on Penny, her arms wrapped around his waist, her broken leg aching with every stride. But she didn't complain. She couldn't not when Jacob's future hung in the balance. "We'll find them," Eli said as they rode. "The other passengers. Someone must have seen where they went. And if we don't, then we'll find another way. There's always another way, Clara. You just have to be willing to fight for it." Clara pressed her face against his back, breathing in the scent of leather and dust, and the man she loved. "I'm willing," she said. "For you. For Jacob. I'm willing to fight for everything." Eli's hand covered hers where it rested on his stomach. "I know you are. It's one of the reasons I love you." They rode on the rising sun at their backs and uncertainty ahead. But for the first time in her life, Clara wasn't afraid of the unknown, because she wasn't facing it alone. And somewhere behind them in a small room in Millbrook, Jacob Dawson. For that was his name now. Whatever the courts might say, slept peacefully, dreaming of the family he'd found in the middle of a storm. The family that was fighting to keep him. Denver was chaos. Clara had never seen so many people in one place, merchants, shouting horses, clattering children running between wagons. Her leg throbbed mercilessly after the long ride, but she pushed the pain aside. They had less than 2 days to find the witnesses who could save Jacob. "Where do we start?" she asked as Eli helped her down from Penny. "The hotels. If the other passengers made it to Denver, they would have needed somewhere to stay." Eli's jaw was set with determination. "We split up. Cover more ground." "I can barely walk." "Then you take the hotels near the courthouse. I'll handle the ones farther out." He pressed a quick kiss to her forehead. "We meet back here in 4 hours. If you find anything, I'll send word." Clara gripped his hand. "Be careful." "Always am." He was gone before she could argue. Clara spent the next 3 hours limping from hotel to hotel, describing the passengers. She remembered the 2 businessmen from Boston, the elderly woman, her Uncle Henry. Most clerks shook their heads. Some didn't even bother to listen. By the time she reached the 4th hotel, her leg was screaming and her hope was fading. "I'm looking for a man named Henry Morgan," she told the clerk, a thin young man with spectacles. "He would have arrived about a week ago, possibly with 2 other men and an elderly woman." The clerk frowned. "Morgan, you say?" "We had a Henry Morgan register 5 days ago. Room 12. Clara's heart nearly stopped. "He's here right now." "Should be. He hasn't checked out." Clara didn't wait for directions. She found room 12 on her own, her crutch thumping against the wooden floor as she moved faster than she had since the accident. She knocked. Once. Twice. The door opened, and there stood her uncle, older, grayer, with deep lines of worry etched into his face. His eyes went wide. "Bethany, I mean Clara." He caught himself using her proper name. "Good Lord, child, we thought you were dead. Uncle Henry." Clara fell into his arms, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I'd never see you again. When the flood came, when we couldn't find you." His voice broke. "I've been searching for a week, sent telegrams everywhere. No one knew what happened to you. I survived. A man found me, saved me." Clara pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Uncle, I need your help. There's a boy, Jacob. He lost his family in the flood, and a man named Thomas Whitfield is trying to take him away from us. There's a hearing tomorrow. I need you to testify." "Whitfield." Henry's expression darkened. "The merchant from Cold Spring, I know of him. He's got a reputation, Clara, not a good one." "What kind of reputation?" "The kind that involves money changing hands to make problems disappear. The kind that involves people who cross him having accidents." Clara's blood chilled. "He's dangerous. More than you know." Henry took her hands. "But if you need me to testify, I'll do it. Your family. And if this Thomas Whitfield is the man I've heard about, someone needs to stand up to him. The other passengers, the businessmen, the elderly woman, do you know where they are? The Hendersons went back east, but Samuel Thornton, one of the Boston men, he's still here. He's been testifying in a land dispute case. I can take you to him." For the first time in days, Clara felt something like hope. Eli returned to their meeting spot to find Clara waiting with 2 men, her uncle, and a well-dressed gentleman who introduced himself as Samuel Thornton. "Mr. Thornton saw everything," Clara said breathlessly. "The flood, the passengers abandoning me, everything. He's agreed to testify. I should have done more that day. Thornton's face was haunted with guilt. I should have insisted we go back for you. But the others were panicking and I was a coward. You can make it right tomorrow. Eli shook the man's hand firmly. Thank you for coming forward. It's the least I can do. That night, Clara and Eli sat in their small hotel room, too nervous to sleep. What if it's not enough? Clara whispered. What if Thomas's lawyers twist everything? Then we'll untwist it. Eli pulled her close. We've come too far to lose now, Clara. That boy is our son. No court, no lawyer, no amount of money is going to change that. You sound so sure. I am sure. He kissed her temple. I spent 8 years running from everything that mattered. I'm done running. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. Clara nestled against him, drawing strength from his warmth. Together, she echoed. But sleep wouldn't come. And somewhere in the darkness, Clara prayed for a miracle. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread about the case: the orphaned boy, the mysterious cowboy, the wealthy merchant fighting for custody. People lined the walls, craning their necks to see. Clara sat at the front with Eli, her heart hammering. Across the aisle, Thomas Whitfield looked immaculate in an expensive suit flanked by 2 lawyers who radiated confidence. All rise, the bailiff called. The Honorable Judge Marcus Webb presiding. The judge was a stern-faced man in his 60s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He settled into his chair and surveyed the room. This is a custody hearing regarding the minor child Jacob Winters. Mr. Whitfield, you've filed a petition claiming the child is your ward. Present your case. Thomas's lead lawyer stood smooth as silk. Your Honor, my client has a documented agreement with the late Mr. and Mrs. Winters to assume guardianship of their son in the event of their deaths. The child was taken from the scene of the tragedy by strangers Mr. and Mrs. Dawson, who have no legal claim to him whatsoever. Objection. Clara was on her feet before she realized she'd moved. That's a lie. Mrs. Dawson. The judge's voice was sharp. You'll have your turn to speak. Sit down. Clara sat trembling with anger. Thomas's lawyer continued producing documents that Clara had never seen: papers supposedly signed by Jacob's parents giving Thomas Whitfield custody rights. These documents were filed with the territorial court 6 months ago, the lawyer explained. My client has simply been waiting for the appropriate time to exercise his rights. Those documents are forged, Eli said quietly, but his voice carried. Order. The judge banged his gavel. One more outburst and I'll clear this courtroom. He turned to Clara and Eli. Do you have legal representation? No, Your Honor, Clara admitted. But we have witnesses, people who can testify to what really happened. The judge considered this. Very well, present your case. Clara called her uncle first. Henry Morgan took the stand, his hands steady despite the tension in the room. I was on the stagecoach with my niece when the flood struck, he testified. The coach overturned. Clara was trapped. The other passengers, myself included, God, forgive me, we panicked. We ran. We left her behind. And the boy, Clara prompted. Did you see Jacob Winters on that stagecoach? No, ma'am. There was no child on our coach. The Winters family wasn't traveling with us. I'd never even heard of them until Clara told me about finding Jacob in the flood. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Mr. Morgan. Thomas's lawyer approached, smiling coldly. You admit you abandoned your own niece in a flood. Why should this court believe anything you say? Because I'm telling the truth. And because I've spent every day since then trying to make it right. Samuel Thornton's testimony was even more damning. The Boston businessman confirmed everything: the flood, the panic, the absence of any child. Mr. Whitfield claims Jacob Winters was supposed to travel to him in Cold Spring, Thornton said. But I've done business in that territory for years. I know the stagecoach routes. The Winters family lived in Kansas. They wouldn't have been anywhere near our coach. Objection. Thomas's lawyer was sweating now. This is speculation. Sustained. The witness will stick to first-hand observations. But the damage was done. Clara could see doubt creeping into the judge's expression. Then it was Thomas's turn. He took the stand with the confidence of a man who had bought his way out of trouble before. His lawyers led him through a rehearsed story, how he'd known the Winters family, how he'd promised to care for Jacob, how Clara and Eli had stolen the boy away. "I only want what's best for the child," Thomas said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "These people, they're drifters. They have no home, no stability, nothing to offer a grieving boy." "Mr. Whitfield." Clara stood, her voice steady, despite her pounding heart. "May I ask you a question?" The judge nodded. "Proceed." "You claim you knew Jacob's family. What was his mother's name?" Thomas hesitated. "Rebecca Winters. And his sister, Sarah." "Interesting." Clara turned to face the courtroom. "Because Jacob told us his mother's name was Margaret, and he never had a sister named Sarah. He had a baby sister named Hannah." The courtroom erupted. "Order." The judge banged his gavel. "Mr. Whitfield, explain this discrepancy." Thomas's face had gone pale. I must have misremembered. It's been a stressful time." "You misremembered the names of a family you claim to have known well enough to be named guardian of their child?" "The documents speak for themselves, Your Honor." "Do they?" Clara limped forward, her broken leg forgotten in the heat of the moment. "Because I had a telegraph sent this morning to the county clerk in Kansas where the Winters family lived. They have no record of any guardianship agreement. No record of Thomas Whitfield at all." She produced a piece of paper, the response she'd received just an hour before the hearing. Thomas's lawyer grabbed the document, his face going white as he read it. "Your Honor," he stammered, "we need a recess to—" "You need nothing." The judge's voice was ice. "Mr. Whitfield, did you forge these guardianship documents?" Thomas's mask finally cracked. "That woman was supposed to be my wife," he burst out. "I paid for her passage, arranged everything, and she threw it all away for some worthless cowboy. The boy was leverage. Nothing more. She would have come back to me if she thought she could save him." The courtroom went silent. "So," the judge said slowly, "you admit that your petition was fraudulent, that you never knew the Winters family, that this entire case was an attempt to coerce Mrs. Dawson into marriage." Thomas's lawyers were already backing away from their client. "I want this man arrested for fraud, forgery, and attempted coercion." The judge banged his gavel, anged his. "Case dismissed. Custody of Jacob Winters is hereby awarded to Elijah and Clara Dawson, pending formal adoption proceedings." Clara collapsed against Eli, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she sobbed. "We actually did it." "You did it." Eli held her tight, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "You were magnificent, Clara." Thomas was led away by court officers, his face twisted with impotent rage. As he passed Clara, he spat one final threat. "This isn't over." "Yes," Clara said calmly. "It is." They arrived back in Millbrook 3 days later, exhausted but triumphant. Jacob was waiting on the porch of the boarding house, Reverend Pritchard's hand on his shoulder. The moment he saw them, he broke free and ran. "Ma, Pa." Clara caught him, ignoring the pain in her leg, as she swung him into her arms. "It's over, sweetheart. You're ours. Officially, legally, forever ours." "Really?" Jacob's eyes were huge. "The bad man can't take me away." "Never." Eli wrapped his arms around both of them. "You're stuck with us, remember?" Jacob laughed, a real laugh, full and bright and free of fear. "I remember." Mrs. Kincaid was crying. Dr. Hayes was shaking Eli's hand. Reverend Pritchard just smiled, that knowing, peaceful smile that seemed to see everything. "I told you," he said quietly to Clara. "Good people find their way to each other, even in the darkest storms." "Thank you." Clara hugged him fiercely. "For everything. For believing in us when we couldn't believe in ourselves." Belief is easy when you know where to look. The Reverend glanced at Eli, at Jacob, at the little family that had been forged in flood and fire. Some things are just meant to be. That evening, as the sun set over the Colorado plains, Clara sat on the porch with Eli while Jacob played in the yard. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now." Eli smiled, taking her hand. "Now we live. We build that homestead I talked about. We raise our son. We grow old together." "That sounds wonderful." "It does, doesn't it?" He brought her hand to his lips. "I never thought I'd have this, Clara. A home, a family, something worth staying for. And now I can't imagine wanting anything else." Jacob came running over, breathless with excitement. "Ma, look what I found." He held up a small blue stone, smooth and perfect. "It's the same color as Pa's eyes." Clara looked at Eli, saw the tears he was trying to hide. "Jesse's favorite color," she murmured. "Yeah." Eli's voice was rough. "Yeah, it was." "Can I keep it?" Jacob asked. "To remember today." Eli knelt down, taking the stone from his son's hands. "You know what, Jacob? I think this stone is special. I think it found you for a reason." "What reason?" "To remind us that good things can come from bad times, that storms can bring people together instead of tearing them apart." Eli pressed the stone back into Jacob's palm. "You keep this, son, and whenever you're scared or sad or feeling alone, you hold it tight, and remember you've got a family now. A family that's never going to let you go." Jacob threw his arms around Eli's neck. "I love you, Pa." "I love you too, son." Eli held him close, his eyes finding Clara's over the boy's shoulder. "More than you'll ever know." Later, after Jacob had been tucked into bed, Clara and Eli stood together under the stars. The sky was clear, endless, full of possibility. "I was supposed to marry Thomas Whitfield," Clara said quietly. "I was supposed to have a practical life with a practical man." "Do you regret it? Choosing differently?" Clara turned to face her husband, this rough, tender, broken-made whole man who had carried her across the plains and into a life she'd never dared to dream of. "Not for a single second." Eli kissed her, then slow and deep and full of promise. "I used to think I didn't deserve happiness," he murmured against her lips. "That what happened to Jesse meant I was supposed to spend my life punishing myself. And now? Now I think maybe Jesse sent me to that flood. Maybe he knew I needed saving as much as you did. Maybe all of this was his way of telling me it's okay to live again." Clara cupped his face in her hands. "Then let's live, Eli. Let's live enough for both of you." He smiled, and in that smile, Clara saw their whole future. The homestead they would build, the children they might have, the grandchildren who would sit on their laps and hear the story of how Grandma and Grandpa found each other in a summer storm. "Deal," he said. And there, under the endless Colorado sky, surrounded by the land that had tried to break them and failed, Clara and Eli Dawson began their forever. 5 years later, on a warm summer evening, a woman with a slight limp walked through the door of a prosperous homestead, carrying fresh bread from the oven. Her husband looked up from the ledger he was working on, smiled, and rose to greet her with a kiss. In the yard, 3 children played, Jacob, now 13 and tall as his father, chasing his younger sisters through the tall grass while they shrieked with laughter. "Dinner's almost ready," Clara called. "Wash up, all of you." "Yes, Ma," came the chorus of voices. Eli wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder as they watched their children. "Happy?" he asked. Clara thought about the girl she'd been 5 years ago, alone, afraid, convinced that practical was the best she could hope for. She thought about the storm that had broken her leg and saved her soul. She thought about a man who carried her across the plains and into a life beyond her wildest dreams. "Yes," she said simply. "Completely." Because Clara Dawson had learned something that summer day in 1878, something that changed everything she thought she knew about life and love and fate. She learned that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you turns out to be the best. She learned that family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up when you need them most. And she learned that love, real love, isn't about finding someone suitable. It's about finding someone who carries you through the flood and never lets go. The mail-order bride with the broken leg had finally found her home, and she was never letting go either.